Hello and welcome back to the Loco Files. In today's episode we'll be looking at the Great Western Railway Castle Class. No, not you Class 43 castle sets, you will be covered in a later episode. The 4073 or Castle Class are a batch of 460 steam locomotives built by the Great Western Railway, being constructed between 1923 and 1950. They were designed by the railway's chief mechanical engineer, Charles Collett, for working the company's express passenger trains. They could reach speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. The origins of this highly successful design date back to the Star Class of 1907, which introduced the basic 4-cylinder 460 layout with long travel valves and bell pair fireboxes that was to become synonymous of Great Western Railway express passenger locomotive design, aka copy, paste, enlarge in Photoshop, you have a new train. Congratulations. The Star Class was designed to take the top express trains on the Great Western, with 61 in service by 1914, but after the Great War there was a need for an improved design. To meet this need, the then Chief Mechanical Engineer, George Jackson Churchward, had in mind an enlarged Star design with a standard No. 7 boiler as fitted to his 4700 class express freight locomotives. However, this combination would have taken the axle load over the 20-ton limit then set by the civil engineers, and in the end, nothing came of this idea. Charles Collett succeeded Churchward as CME of the Great Western in 1922, and immediately set about meeting the need for a new locomotive design that would both supplement the Stars and replace them on the heaviest expresses. Collett's solution was to take the basic layout of the Star Class with an extended frame and add a newly designed No. 8 boiler, which was both larger and lighter. The increased amount of steam that this produced allowed for an increase in the cylinder diameter from 15 by 26 inches to 16 by 26 inches. The extended frame allowed for a side window cab and an increased grate area. The result was an increase in tractive effort to 31,625 pounds, and a locomotive that looked attractive and well proportioned while remaining within the 20-ton axle limit. Unlike the Star Class, there was no prototype. Collett was sufficiently confident of the design to place an order with Swindon Works, becoming Lot 224 for 10 locomotives in 1923, although there was a 4-month delay between the appearance of the first example in August and the second in December 1923 to allow for the correction of any teething problems. Thereafter, the remaining 8 locomotives came out at regular intervals until April 1924. They were numbered 4073 to 4082, the number series continuing unbroken from the Star Class. The new locomotives were named after castles in the west, beginning with Caerphilly Castle. Over the 27 years from August 1923 to August 1950, 155 castles were built at Swindon from new, and a further 16 were converted from other classes. In February 1952, 2 engines, 4082 Windsor Castle and 7013 Bristol Castle, swapped names and numbers. 7013 was disguised as 4082 to run King George VI's funeral train, and the numbers were never swapped back. 4082 was withdrawn from service in 1964 as 7013 and vice versa in 1965. Several members of the Star Class, and the only Great Western Pacific, were rebuilt into members of the Castle Class. Number 111, the Great Bear, was rebuilt between January and September 1924, although only the front portion of the original frames and the number plates were used again, but probably little else. The new locomotive was renamed Viscount Churchill and survived until withdrawal in July 1953. In April 1925, Star Class No. 4009 Shooting Star was likewise rebuilt as a castle by extending the frames and fitting a new Castle class boiler and cab. It was renumbered and renamed 100A1 Lloyds and was withdrawn in 1950. In October 1925, a second Star Class No. 4016, the Somerset Light Infantry, was similarly converted to a castle, although in this case it retained its name and number. Two further conversions of stars were undertaken in 1926, with numbers 4032 Queen Alexandra and 4073 the South Wales Borderers, retaining their names and numbers and surviving until 1951 and 1962 respectively. In November 1929, the prototype for the Star Class, number 4000 North Star, was rebuilt into a castle, being subsequently withdrawn in 1957. Between 1937 and 1940, a further 10 members from the Abbey series of the Star Class, numbers 4063 to 4072, were rebuilt as castles on Lot 317. They were allocated new numbers, going from 5083 to 5092, but retained their original names, and were withdrawn between 1958 and 1964. When introduced, they were heralded as Britain's most powerful express passenger locomotive, being some 10% more powerful than the Stars. The first, number 4073 Caerphilly Castle, made its debut at Paddington Station on the 23rd of August 1923. The choice of 4082 as Windsor Castle proved fortuitous, as this locomotive was used to haul the royal train when King George V and Queen Mary visited Swindon Works in 1924, and much publicity was gained when the King was invited to drive the engine back from the works to the station before its return journey, with the Queen and several high-ranking Great Western officers also on the footplate. I don't think you'd be able to get away with that even if you were a royal these days. During 1924, 4073 Caerphilly Castle was exhibited at the British Empire Exhibition at Wembley, alongside Sir Nigel Gresley's Flying Scotsman. The Great Western declared their engine to be more powerful than its bigger LNER rival, and in terms of tractive effort alone, they were entitled to do so. As a result of this, Great Western General Manager Sir Felix Pole proposed to the LNER Southern Area General Manager Alexander Wilson that a trial of the two types should take place via an exchange agreement. The resulting trials commenced in April 1925, with 4079 Pendennis Castle representing the Great Western on the East Coast Main Line, and 4474 Victor Wilde representing the LNER on Great Western Metal. On the first morning, Pendennis Castle was to work a 480-ton train from King's Cross to Doncaster, and LNER officials fully expected the smaller and lighter engine to encounter problems climbing Holloway Bank. However, railway writer Cecil J. Allen records that the Great Western locomotive made a faster start from King's Cross to Finsbury Park than any LNER Pacific he had recorded up to that point. And over the trial, Pendennis kept well within the scheduled time and used less coal, considerably denting the LNER's pride. For the LNER, Victor Wilde was compared on the Cornish Riviera Express to 4074 Caldecott Castle, and although it kept to time, the longer wheelbase of the Pacific proved unsuited to many curves on the route. Again, the Great Western took the honours with Caldecott Castle, burning less fuel and always ahead of time, this being illustrated on the last 2 days of the trial by gaining 15 minutes on the schedule in both directions. In 1926, number 5000 Launceston Castle was loaned to the London Midland and Scottish Railway, where it ran trials between London and Carlisle. The locomotive fulfilled the LMS's requirements so well that the latter first requested the Great Western to build them a batch of castles for use on the West Coast Main Line, and failing that, a full set of construction drawings. Both proposals were rejected by the Great Western Board of Directors. However, the LMS had the last laugh, and eventually succeeded in gaining access to the design by recruiting a certain William Stanier, the Great Western Railway's works manager at its Swindon works, to become their new CME. In 1935, attention was turning to streamlining locomotives, particularly with the introduction of the Eleanor A4s. And the Great Western felt they could gain publicity in this area. Instructions were passed to Swindon Works to select a suitable locomotive, and as 5005 Manorbier Castle was being prepared for test, additions were made to the locomotive to effect some streamlining. The application of the shaped steel sheets in an attempt to smooth airflow has been described as a bodge job, and certainly lacked either the elegance of the A4 design or the sense of power associated with the streamlined LMS Coronation class introduced 2 years later. Once the additions had been added, a test run was carried out between Bristol and Swindon, during which Manorbier Castle achieved a speed of 100 miles per hour. But the experiment did not have any lasting effects on Great Western locomotive design, and the additions were later removed. So I guess they just like to copy and paste then. The castles handled all but the heaviest loads, these being entrusted to the 30-strong King class, themselves a development of the Castle class, with an even larger boiler and smaller wheels, for both increased tractive effort and to allow for loading gauge clearances. The Castle class was noted for superb performances overall, and notably on the Cheltenham Flyer during the 1930s. For example, on the 6th of June 1932, the train pulled by 5006 Tregenna Castle covered the 77.25 miles from Swindon to Paddington at an average speed of 81.68 miles per hour, start to stop. This world record for steam traction was widely regarded as an astonishing feat. In 1946, Frederick Hawksworth, Collett's successor, introduced a higher degree of superheating to the castle boiler, with the results being increased economy in water consumption. From 1956, the fitting of double chimneys to selected engines combined with larger superheaters further enhanced their capacity for sustained high-speed runnings. The fastest recorded speed of a castle class was 102 miles per hour, achieved by 7018 Driswilling Castle at Little Summerford in April 1958, whilst hauling the Bristolian from Bristol to London. The non-stop run of over 117 miles took 93 minutes and 50 seconds, which averages out to more than 75 miles per hour. Between 1946 and 1948, 5 engines, 100A1, 5039, 5079, 5083 and 5091 were converted to oil firing, but were soon restored to coal burning. 11 hulls were similarly converted. As mentioned earlier, on the 28th of April 1924, King George V drove locomotive number 4082, Windsor Castle, from Swindon Works to Swindon Railway Station, accompanied on the footplate by Queen Mary. Plaques to commemorate the event were fixed to the side of the cab, and it was considered to be a royal locomotive from then onwards. At the King's State funeral on the 28th of January 1936, Windsor Castle was chosen to haul the funeral train from Paddington Station in London to Windsor and Eton. It was preceded at 10-minute intervals by another 6 trains hauled by Castle-class engines, each carrying royal and other important mourners. The same locomotive was requested for the funeral of King George VI in February 1952. However, Windsor Castle was undergoing repair at Swindon Works at the time, so the number, nameplates and commemorative plaques were swapped with number 7013 Bristol Castle for the event. Following the funeral, the 2 locomotives retained their exchanged identities, but the commemorative plaques were returned. Number 7013, originally 4082, was scrapped in September 1964, whilst 4082, originally 7013, survived until February 1965. Withdrawals of steam power started in the 1950s, with the first 100A1 Lloyds withdrawn from Old Oak Common in March 1950. The first new-build castle, number 4091 Dudley Castle, was withdrawn from Old Oak Common nearly 9 years later in January 1959. The lowest mileage of a castle class was 580,346 miles, run by 7035 Ulkmore Castle between August 1950 and June 1964. The highest mileage of any member of the class goes to 4080 Powderham Castle, which totalled 1,974,461 miles in 40 years and 5 months of service. The last 3 castles to be withdrawn were all allocated to Gloucestershire, with 5042 Winchester Castle and 7022 Hereford Castle being withdrawn in June 1965, and the last member of the class to be withdrawn was 7029 Clun Castle in December of that year, which worked the last steam-hauled service out of Paddington on the 27th of November 1965. On the 4th of March 1967, numbers 7029 Clun Castle and 4079 Pendennis Castle hauled specials from Banbury and Oxford respectively to Chester to mark the end of through trains between Paddington and Birkenhead. These 2 and 6 other members of the class have survived into preservation. Of the 8 members to be preserved, 6 have steamed and have been operating on the main line. 3 were obtained directly from British Railways, being 4073, 4079 and 7029, with the remaining 5 being rescued from Barry Scrapyard. Number 4073 Caerphilly Castle was given directly to the National Collection upon withdrawal, and has not run since then. It can currently be found at Steam, the Museum of the Great Western Railway in Swindon. Possibly the most controversial member of the class in recent years, number 7027 Thornbury Castle, was in ex-Barry Scrapyard condition, and in July 2016 was sold by Pete Waterman to the Somerset transport firm JJB Holdings SW. It was transported to Weston Supermare upon a low loader, and then placed on temporary track in the Crossville Motor Services bus depot. In the summer of 2018, it was moved briefly to Tyseley Locomotive Works in Birmingham to make an appearance at their open weekend, before moving to its planned home at the West Somerset Railway for restoration. Until recently, it was located at Loughborough on the Great Central Railway, but will not be restored as it was bought by the 4709 group, who intend to use parts from the castle to bring the Night Owls back from the dead. 2 of the 8 preserved castles, numbers 5043, Earl of Mount Edgecombe, and 7029, are fitted with double chimneys, whilst the remaining 6 are still fitted with their original singles, until they nick that for the Night Owl. 4079 was purchased by Sir William McAlpine and hauled a small number of rail tours on the main line in its early preservation career, before being sold to Hammersley Iron in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and exported in 1977. In 1989 it was moved by road to Perth, where it double-headed with 4472 Flying Scotsman, operating as far as Esperance. In 2000 it was donated by Rio Tinto to the Great Western Society and restored to operational condition at Didcot Railway Centre in 2021. As of 2024, 3 castles are currently operational, with 5043 and 7029 having mainline certificates, and 4079 being restricted to the heritage sector only. 2 further members of the class are in the process of undergoing overhauls, with 5080 planned to operate on the mainline as part of Tysley's pool of mainline certified engines, alongside 5043 and 7029. 4079 was originally planned to operate on the mainline following its overhaul, but a later announcement by Didcot stated that they intend to stop operating on the mainline, meaning it will only run on heritage railways across the country. 5029 is also currently in the process of undergoing a mainline standard overhaul, which is currently expected to be finished in late 2024. I'd like to thank you all for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe. And let me know if you've been behind any castles on the main line or on any of our country's lovely heritage network. If you'd like to find out what we're covering in the next episode, I highly recommend you subscribe.